Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on how to assign budgets and make projections for influencer marketing success. I'm Fiona, so I'm the head of gaming at Media Bodies, which means I look after and build the initial strategy for our incoming mobile, console, and PC clients. And building that initial strategy includes setting things like recommended budgets and the type of influencers that we'll include in our initial campaigns, which is sort of what we'll speak about today. At Media Bodies, we've been running, measurable campaigns for over 11 years now across YouTube, podcast, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitch. And over these 11 years, we've worked with all sorts of gaming companies, from small studios to the largest in the mobile space. And consistently, one of the first questions we're always asked is, how do we set our influence marketing budgets, and what sort of performance can we expect to see from these initial campaigns? So as we cover these topics today, who better to have with me than an expert in all things influencer marketing, Marion Balinoff, who has led influencer strategy for some of the top mobile gaming studios. But I'll let you introduce yourself properly as well.
Thank you, Fiona. Hi, everyone. So I'm Marion. I've been working in influence marketing for the past 10 years, and the last 6 of them specialize in mobile gaming. So I worked in different mobile gaming studios where I was basically building and executing the influencer marketing strategy for different mobile games. I've always been really focused on performance, so trying to measure the performance of the campaign, ensuring that we get good quality users and that we reach our profitability targets. And so a couple of years ago, I decided to launch my own business in consultancy because I really wanted to diversify the apps and then the projects on which I worked. And so yeah, I've been a client of Media Bodies before I was a consultant. So it's funny to be on a webinar together again.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely good to have your insight here today. But yeah, so as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about how to assign budgets and make projections for influence marketing success today. And for anyone that has to jump off or misses this live recording completely, it'll also be available to watch afterwards. And for those of you who are joining us today, we also have a CPM cheat sheet to send out via email as well afterwards, as a free resource to help with your budget calculations after this webinar. So the first thing that we'll be discussing today is, why do strategic budget allocations matter, and is there this single recommended minimum budget? So the sort of context I can share off the bat is, when we have people fill in our forms on our website when they're interested in testing influencer marketing, often the one table that gets left out is the budget, either because they're not sure about what minimum budget they should have or what budget they should have for an initial influencer marketing test, or sometimes there's even internal test budgets that are already in place that they need to adhere to. So yeah, it can be a confusing topic of how we set that minimum budget.
No, 100%. And like from my side, like I know this is probably the first question that I get all the time, like how much do I need to invest? And so I'm glad that we can cover this today and that people can also see how we do the estimations, and hopefully it's going to be useful for many.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And another thing I've had in the past is either companies have spent too little and then not seen any results, or they've blown their entire budget on a mega influencer. I think I've heard PewDiePie before, Mr. Beast before, and that's not had great results either. So with this in mind, why do you think strategic budget allocations matter when setting your first campaigns?
So what I explained to my client is that to begin with, what everyone needs to understand is that influencer marketing traffic is going to be organic, right? Most of it is going to be organic. If you want me to give you a number, I tend to say on average 70% of the traffic from your campaign is going to be organic. That means people are going to be watching the content on social media. They're going to see their favorite influencer, but they're not necessarily going to click the tracking link nor scan the QR code. They're going to take their phone on the side, or if they're watching on TV or on desktop, and then they're going to find your app or your game on the App Store and download it. And so that install is not going to be attributed back to your campaign because that person hasn't followed any of the tracking system. So once we have this in mind, it's really important if you want to do performance-driven campaign and if you want to measure your results, that this organic traffic is attributed back to your campaign, because otherwise there's absolutely no chance with only 30% on average of the track traffic that you're going to reach profitability. So now it leads me to understanding then how much do you need to invest in your campaign, because it means you need to invest enough money to generate a spike in your organic metrics during your campaign period, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And so I think a lot of people, especially that I speak to, they've been mostly working on sort of paid UA and paid spend. And so suddenly coming in and talking about, blending tracked and organic traffic can be quite a difficult thing to get your head around. So I think, yeah, it's very important to highlight the pure percentage of this organic traffic that is part of the campaign.
Exactly. And I think when you get started, before even everything that you start doing, like it's really important that everyone in the company that's going to look at the results is on board on the methodology that you're going to follow, and that is on board on the fact that not everything is going to be accurate, right? So as you said, like they're used to tracking all the campaigns through Meta, through Google, through whatever, right? Here you're going to have some estimations, you're going to have a little bit of guesswork, but hey, like everyone in the industry is doing it like that, and it's not preventing everyone from doing influencer marketing. So as long as you can accept that there's going to be a little bit of estimations, then okay, let's move forward and then let's launch your campaigns.
For sure. And yeah, so these minimum budgets, they vary from person to person depending on how much traffic we need in order to see that spike. And so we've established why we need to see that spike in order to see the organic uplift. But I guess that moves me on to our next question of what impacts this, what impacts what metrics and factors matter when making these budget considerations.
Yeah, so there's a few metrics that I always require from my clients or potential clients if they want me to make some estimations, right? So to make those estimations, we're gonna need to understand, obviously, first of all, what's your target audience? Because whether it is female, male, 18 plus, 35 plus, is going to really impact our calculations. We're going to need to understand, like, obviously, what type of game are you going to be advertising. If it's very niche, it might not convert the same as a match 3 game that is similar to a Candy Crush, for example. The markets that you want to target, obviously, because it's going to impact the cost of the creators, but also it's going to this is what we need to base our estimations on, right? So if you're targeting the US and it's your biggest market and it's where you have most of your organic installs, you're going to need to spend obviously a lot more than if you target like a smaller country like Portugal, for example. So all those metrics, you're going to need to have them at hand in order for you to be able to measure, to estimate the minimum budget that you should be investing.
Sure. And how does different platforms come into that as well? So obviously, we have a lot of clients that work predominantly on YouTube, but then others work on TikTok or Twitch or Instagram, all sorts of different platforms.
So what's going to impact that is obviously the price of the creators in each of those platforms is going to vary because they're not producing the same type of content. And then the conversion rate. The conversion rate is going to be the cornerstone of your estimations. And it will vary based on the platform, as you said, the social media platform is going to vary based on the audience that you want to target. It's going to vary based on the countries that you're targeting. So it's really important to have this in mind and just understand, like, what are we targeting here and where are we going to target those users?
Sure. So to sum up, we're looking at audience factors, so demographic, type of content, the game, what type of game, and the sort of conversion rates we could be expecting, platform factors, CPM, expected views of each of the platform. It's a lot of information to all take into account at once. So how do we consolidate this and calculate a minimum budget in practice, taking into account all that different information?
We can make some examples if you want. I can share my screen. I have a spreadsheet around. What sort of scenario could we use?
I think what would be a good one to start with is, let's say, sort of casual merge title that's targeted towards that sort of slightly older female 35 plus market in the US.
So female 35 plus, we said, and in the US, right? So those would be the sort of convert. So let's assume we want to do performance, right? So we want to drive installs that are going to generate revenue, and we want to measure the profitability of the campaign. For this type of game, I would definitely look into YouTube to begin with. The reason for that is because through YouTube, you're going to have a link that is going to be directly in the description of the video. You can have one in the pinned comment as well, and you can also have a QR code on screen, right? And we know that the consumption of YouTube in terms of like long form video is growing more and more every year, and people tend to watch it even on television, which is why the use of like QR code makes a lot of sense. We could think that female 35 plus for a casual merge game, we would find them on Instagram. They definitely are on Instagram. My point being is that in terms of like tracking possibilities, Instagram is very restrictive. You cannot have a link directly in the post. You can have a link obviously in the story, which is great because it's directly there. However, one thing to point out is the fact that stories are only live for 24 hours. So then your content is gone, right? Whereas on YouTube, if you're part of a longer video, this is basically almost lifetime, right? So even after your campaign is over, the video that you've sponsored will still generate views over time, and the long tail can be really, really powerful. So moving back to our budget estimation, let's assume we're doing YouTube. I'm going to write it here so people know. I don't know. Let's imagine that we have a game that has 500 organic installs in the US, right? Here it's calculated me my campaign daily install target. The way I calculate it usually is I'm estimating that I would like to target a 35% increase in organic during my campaign period, right? So each day I want to see 35% more installs, so that spike is sort of visible, right? Obviously, the more you target, the better, right? You could target twice as many installs during your campaign period, and you would make sure that your spike in your organic is going to be very visible. That being said, it depends on how many installs you need to generate. For smaller amount of installs like this is definitely doable. When you start having several thousands of installs every day, it's going to be harder because it means you need to invest a lot more money, right? But at least 35% gives people a rule of thumb, right? Then it gives me my campaign total install target. This is calculated by multiplying my campaign daily install target by 7. Why 7? Because we are going to assume that we are going to measure the performance of the YouTube videos of the campaign within the first 7 days. The reason for that is because the majority of the views from the videos on YouTube happen during the first 7 days. As I was saying before, there is still a very long tail, and depending on the video, some of them can become a lot more viral later on, and it can generate a lot more views. But the majority will happen during the first 7 days. The reason we also look into only 7 days is because we want to be able to measure our organic spike, right? The longer it is, the harder it's going to be because the installs are going to be diluted, right? So in that sense, we're being very restrictive. And I think if you're launching your first 3 campaigns, you should look into 7 days. Once you better understand your performance, you can extend that to 30 days, which is going to be the industry average. But for the sake of the accuracy of the analysis, let's stick to 7 days first, right? So that means during my campaign period, we need to generate 1,225 installs, right? And now we want to understand how many views do we need to target for that for those installs to happen, so we can measure our organic spike, right? So let's say we need, I don't know, 250,000 views. That's not enough. So let's say 750,000, right? So let's say maybe, okay, 650,000 views it's gonna generate in our pessimistic scenario 1,300 installs, right? I usually make different scenarios because obviously when you get started with influencer marketing, you don't know exactly how much installs you're gonna get, like what's gonna be your conversion rate. As we said before, it's gonna depend on a variety of metrics of factors, especially the game itself, right? How appealing is it? Like how different is it, right? That's why I tend to make different scenarios. And again, for female 35 plus in the US, those scenarios, conversion rate scenarios would be close to the reality, right?
Sure.
So with this scenario, we see that in the pessimistic scenario, we have at least the numbers of installs that we want to generate, right? But now we want to understand, okay, how much is this going to cost us, right? So the average CPM for YouTube in the US, targeting channels, so targeting influencers with female 35 plus audience, is going to be around $50, right? I believe you were saying at the beginning that you're going to be sharing a cheat sheet.
Yes.
Exactly, with CPM. So that's gonna grant people some information and give them an understanding of like, okay, how much are the CPMs? A question that I get often asked from client is like, okay, where can we find like a table that summarizes all the CPMs? Unfortunately, there's no resources like that is openly available to everyone. It's a bit of a shame, I agree. But the thing is that, in a sense, influencer marketing is still a bit of the Wild West, because you have, even though I'm telling you the average is around $50, it happens many, many, many times that I've received prices from creators within those audience demographic where they're asking for $200 CPM or even more than that, right? So this is going to
I've
be an
seen
average.
1,000 before.
Exactly, yeah, 100%. So exactly. So now that we've inputted the average CPM, so for those 650,000 views, that's calculated the minimum budget that we should be investing for us in the worst case scenario to generate at least the minimum of installs that we need to get to be able to measure an organic spike in our metrics. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I guess the one question I had is for the conversion rates that we've got there. You mentioned there were benchmarks from sort of similar types of games. How, in your experience, how often is the conversion rate of the actual campaign something that we expect to see in our scenarios? I guess that's why you have pessimistic and optimistic.
I would tend to say, so this is based really on my experience running campaigns with like dozens of mobile games. And there are averages, and like, as I said, like it's really gonna depend on your game and how niche it is, and obviously the types of creators that you work with, if your selection's been right. But it often happens that when we get started, we are between the pessimistic and the medium conversion rates. And then as we go, as we gather data, as we optimize the campaigns, we see obviously the conversion rate increasing towards sometimes even the optimistic scenario.
Sure. And these conversion rates are including tracked and organic traffic from the campaign.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Perfect. I think what might actually be helpful is to try a slightly different type of game and scenario and see how that has an impact
Oh, of
on
course,
the
yeah.
budget and the conversion rates. So we've currently got uh, female 35 plus in the US. What if we try, you know, a more RPG type game for younger males, maybe 18 to 25?
LPG. So you said male.
Mm-hmm.
What did you say? Age range?
I said 18 to 25.
18, 25-year-old. Targeting in the US, you said.
Yes, we've got a request in the chat for a Skyrim type game.
Okay, well, I mean, I guess that's similar somehow. So, in this scenario, obviously, if we're advertising a really big IP like Skyrim, the conversion rate is going to be higher, right? Versus a game on mobile that is an RPG, but they obviously not as well known. Let's say we are not using a big IP because I guess like it's going to be most people's cases. But if you were to do a big IP one, I think you can just increase the conversion rate that I'm about to share, right? So in that scenario, I think we could look around 0.3, 0.5, 0.7. Again, those are averages and those are estimations, right? So again, depending on the game or the app itself, obviously, because it also works for apps, it might vary. But this is to give you a starting point. And the pessimistic are voluntarily very pessimistic. So we ensure that you actually allocate enough money to your campaign to measure your organic. Let's say in this case we have like 1,000 organic installs. That leads us to at least 2,450,000 installs for our campaign target, right? So let's say 1 million views. Okay, let's say 750,000. 850,000. Okay, let's do that. So let's say, because here I'm checking always the installs in the pessimistic scenarios, and I need to ensure that those are higher, equal or higher than my campaign total install target, right? So in that case, that's the case. And then for YouTubers that have an audience based in the US, male 18-25, we're going to be around $30 CPM, right? And so in that case, that helps you understand, okay, the minimum budget you should be spending is around 25,000. If you realize that and you're like, okay, well, that's actually lower than I anticipated, you could decide to actually increase the percentage uplift that you're wanting to see in order to put all the chances on your side to generate more traffic for the campaign. So let's say 50% more installs during the campaign period. That leads us to 3,500. And so, yeah, it should be around, let's say, 1,200,000 views, which is then 3,600 installs, and that increases the budget up to 36,000. But depending on the envelope that you have internally, that might be fitting that budget. So that might be a way to do it.
And is there a minimum that would be too small to actually practically run a campaign? So say you had quite low daily organic installs and you're working in a vertical that had a low CPM and your minimum budget only came out to say $6,000 or something like that. Would you still run a campaign at $6,000, or is maybe that too minimum?
It actually happened to me in the past. I was working with this hockey game, so it was quite niche, and they didn't have that many organic installs. And I think the budget was close to something like that, like 6 or 8K. And I advised my client to actually spend around 30K, because increasing your budget is going to allow you to book more creators, and then test more verticals of creators and gather more data. And in the end, you want to understand whether or not influencer marketing can be a profitable acquisition channel for your app or your game. And to do so, you're going to have to run several campaigns, because with the first one, it is very unlikely that you're going to reach profitability. So that means you need to invest money to gather data, to extract learnings. And obviously, if you spend only 6K every month, that's going to be a very slow process to get to the point where you have enough data to understand whether or not it can work.
Sure, that makes sense. And so we understand the minimum budget that we need to spend per, different types of games. What can we predict beforehand and estimate beforehand when it comes to performance of the campaign?
That's something that I also really often get asked, and that leads me to the second table, which is in a way very similar, but this time we include the estimated LTV of the players or the users, and that's going to help us calculate the ROI, right? So let's say we have a hidden object game, right? So we are targeting US players, female 35 plus, and we have, I don't know, 2,500 daily organic installs. It's a bigger game, let's say. This means we need to target a little bit more than that. Okay, a little bit less, and try to be accurate. So let's say we need at least 3 million views per campaign. As we said, for US based creators with female 35 plus audience on YouTube, we're still on YouTube in this case, we're around $50 CPM, right? That means already the campaign budget is $155,000. So that's already a significant budget. And we know the LTV is at, let's say, $13, right? And in that case, we are also estimating the ROI, right? Again, those are estimations. This is going to vary tremendously, because it can vary tremendously based on the conversion rate, because it might be different in your campaign, based on the creators that you work with. Are they going to generate the same LTV of users than the users that you already have in your game? Hopefully yes, but that might not be the case, because again, at the beginning, you're going to be testing different verticals of creators. By verticals, I mean true crime, fashion, lifestyle, etc. Right? So it's also a matter of testing different things and understanding what can perform. But at least it helps you understand whether or not you have a shot at reaching profitability. If you tell me your game has a $2.5 LTV, right? And we run the estimations, and in all the scenarios, even in the optimistic one, you have 30%, then me as a consultant, I will tell you, look, that's going to be very hard for you to reach profitability, even if we put a lot of effort into optimizing the campaigns month over month, and we get to that point. The fact is the cost of the creators at that $50 CPM is going to be too high compared to the revenue that the users are going to bring.
Sure. And at what day is this ROI set at?
So this will depend obviously on the LTV that we're using. So if most of my clients, they use day 360, so that means that's a ROI day 360. It will depend on what's the time frame in each company, and how they also look into it for user acquisition in general.
Sure. Great. And so we understand how much we need to spend, what we can expect from, performance-wise from what we've spent. I guess the next question is, we've got all this budget, we know what we need to spend, but how are we splitting it up, and how are we, strategizing for that first campaign? You mentioned a couple of verticals that would work well for a hidden object type game, but how do we decide which verticals would work for each of our games, and how many are we testing in that first campaign, how many different creators, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a lot of questions.
It is.
I'm gonna try to answer them as best as I can.
Sure.
So something that I came up with over the years working in different mobile gaming studios, because I also joined a studio where they had no one doing influencer marketing before, so I had to set it up from scratch, right? So I had to really organize and strategize. So I came up with what I call the influencer marketing testing framework. This explains how where to get started. So I recommend when you get started with your first 3 campaigns, to start working with nano and micro creators. So again, if we're talking about YouTube, like creators that are generating less than 250,000 views on average per video. I'm talking about views here, and I think it's very important that everybody remembers that. Don't look into subscribers, don't look into followers, right? Because what matters is actually out of this audience, what's the percentage of those that are actually going to see the content and engage with the content, right? So forget about vanity metrics like subscribers and followers. Focus on views, focus on engagement rate.
Who's even using the subscriber tab on YouTube anymore? It's all the For You page anyway. So
exactly, 100%, exactly. So if you start working with what we call the smaller creators, so less than 250,000 views per video, it's going to allow you to work with many of them, right? Versus if you had the strategy of working with one big creator and putting all your eggs in the same basket. Then once you know the size of the creators that you want to work with, it's about understanding what vertical, right? So obviously you want to start looking into creators that are going to be a good match for your game. Some verticals might be obvious, like if you have a cooking game where you renovate a cafe and that is also maybe a merge 3 game. You want to go into cooking influencers because it makes sense, right? The appeal is there. However, don't restrict yourself to like content that's going to be obviously a good match, right? Because your female 35 plus that like playing your cooking game, they also watch other type of content on social media. So it's a matter of understanding what verticals are going to be appealing to your audience. This is something that you can find talking to industry experts, talking to agencies, because obviously they've run like tons of campaigns, so they know where are those kind of audiences. So again, if we're taking the example of female 35 plus, I would definitely look into cooking. I would look into true crime because true crime is a really big vertical that tends to be cheaper than, for example, beauty or fashion. And people are very engaged. Like a lot of people actually consume true crime content, so I would definitely look into those. And then obviously, as I said, beauty, fashion, lifestyle. But then you can also look into other types of content like DIY, like renovation, like outdoor. It depends, right? So I would say for the first few campaigns, try to select the verticals that make most sense based on your target audience, and test several creators in each of those verticals, right? Why? Because even if on paper 2 influencers are exactly the same, so same audience demographic, same tone of voice, same type of content, same location, same everything, the 2 might perform completely differently, right? So there's so many factors that can impact the performance of a single creator that it's going to be really hard for you to say based on one creator in, let's say, cooking, that all the cooking creators are going to perform. So it's really important that you gather more data um, in each of the verticals that you are testing in order to assess whether or not this vertical has potential or it doesn't have potential. Did I answer all of your questions?
I think so. I think actually some people will be surprised to hear the sort of variety of content that you're mentioning there, because something I often hear, especially more for male audience games, is that I'll speak to our client and they'll say, we've got a mobile game, so our vertical will be mobile gaming, and they'll stick to channels that play other mobile games.
Exactly.
And they'll not test further than that, and then won't necessarily find the performance from these other verticals that you wouldn't even expect would perform for you.
No, exactly. And I've seen even the same, like some uh, travel guide app with like coupons for experiences and stuff, and they're only solely targeting travel YouTubers
Right.
or travel influencers in general. And I'm like, like your audience, they don't like. I could be a target for you, and I would not necessarily only watch travel content. Like I could be watching
Yeah.
cooking because I'm female in your target demographic. So it's really important to really broaden your horizon and ask around, because you might not be the target audience of your game, and you might not know what are the consumption habits of that specific group, right? So I think we had a question on the chat, and we can answer it live. What is a good minimum number of influencers I should work with within each vertical? That's a really good point. So I have several rules
Hmm.
that I tend to follow. At least 10 different influencers, but they should all combine generate at least 500,000 views. The reason for that is because if you work with 10 creators, but they only generated 150,000 views, you might not have enough data to back your decision. So that would be the couple rules. But also, on average, I think it's very important for people to realize that only 30% of the creators in your campaign will reach profitability. They will compensate for the rest, so your overall campaign might reach profitability, but only 30% of them are going to be profitable. So that means you're always going to have creators that are not going to be good performers. And so when I analyze the performance per vertical,
Hmm.
if three creators or three videos out of the 10 that I've tested have reached profitability, I would deem that this vertical is a good performing vertical, and I should keep investing in there.
Sure. And those 10 creators, is that all within one campaign or is that split over multiple campaigns?
I would tend to say it's split of, in multiple campaigns. The reason for that is because when you're going to start building a campaign, you're working with an agency or you're working yourself, contacting creators. Um, if you don't want to be too strict in your influencer selection in terms of like beforehand saying, I want three fashion, three lifestyle, three cooking, because from the creators that are going to respond to you, that are going to be available, that are going to be willing to work at the price that you want to offer them, it's going to be a lot of constraints. And so if on top of that, you know that you only want three creators in each of those verticals, it's going to be hard, right? So the goal is to launch your campaigns with creators in different verticals, um, and then gather the data campaign over campaign.
Mhm.
So then it gives you more time to build that data set.
Sure. And while we're working with these sort of smaller nano creators, we're testing all these different verticals and channels. At what point do we know that it's time to scale up, I guess? And what point do we know that we're moving into these bigger creators?
So once you've started launching a few campaigns and you actually have enough data to start analyzing the verticals, and if you see verticals that you have proven have potential, because at least 30% of the videos have reached profitability, that's when you can start moving to bigger size. So I think it's mid-sized creators, mid-sized to
Sure.
micro creators. So between, again, if we're taking the example of YouTube, between 250,000 views per video to, let's say, 1 million views, right? So it's a wide range, but you also have
Mhm.
creators that are making more than 1 million views, and those are for the next step. So um, yeah, once you've validated that some of the verticals that you've tested have shown potential, that's when you're going to be more comfortable in spending obviously a bigger ticket on each of those influencers individually. And it's all about like building the confidence to move on to bigger size creators that are going to cost you more. They're going to be riskier in a way, but because you've already proven that creators in those verticals are reaching profitability, then you're going to be more confident.
Mhm. And in these campaigns, once you're moving on to these, mid-size and bigger creators, would you say you build the campaign with like all the creators are these larger size, or is there still a mix of some of the smaller nano size creators as well?
I guess it's going to depend on your strategy and the budget that you
Sure.
want to invest, and also like the type of creators that you want to work with. Because I've seen multiple examples. If I'm targeting female 35 plus in the US that are interested in vintage fashion, sewing, etc., I might have proven that vertical works. I'm moving to bigger size creators. I might even find some creators that are making 1 million views and plus. To be fair, it's not the case, but like let's assume it is. You're not gonna find hundreds of and thousands of creators that are making 1 million views plus, or even like 500,000 views within certain verticals of creators. So that's why it's really important for you to be able to work with all sizes of creators, because of what's going to be available on the market. On the opposite side, if you're targeting gamers, 18 plus male, and you want to work with gaming channels, you know there's going to be very much like a lot of them available. So you could potentially launch your campaigns with only bigger size creators every month. But again, it's going to depend on how many of those creators that fit your criteria on paper. So in terms of audience demographic, in terms of content, how many of those are actually going to be interested in working with you at the price that you want to work with them, right? So that will also restrict the pool a little bit.
Sure. I think we have another question as well, which we can answer from the chat, which is there a recent insight or lesson about gaming influencer marketing that's been a game changer for you, or even something that you wish you knew earlier?
That's a good question. So something that I wish I knew earlier, or that I wish someone had told me, and it's taking the conversation a little bit further, because so we were talking about phase 1 of the testing framework, where you gather learning with smaller creators, then you move to mid-sized creators, you optimize your campaigns, and then you move to bigger sized creators, the macro creators. And it's about scaling up, right? And so when you start working with those bigger size creators, that might cost you 25, 50K, 100K, 1 million. The biggest amount that I've spent on a creator was probably around 3 million. And it was Mr. Beast, which is the biggest influencer. So finally, it was already a few. Exactly, it was already a few years back, so maybe it's even more expensive now. But so when you start investing that much money into creators, into a single campaign, even though you might have proven that the creator in that vertical performs, it's a lot of money, right? And it's very risky, and so you want to put all the chances on your side to reach profitability. So what we did back then was to create a custom character based on the influencer, so based on Mr. Beast, that was integrated into the game. So once people downloaded the game, they could either purchase the character in the shop, or play a certain event during a certain period of time to try and acquire the Mr. Beast character. What I wish I had known back then is that obviously, so we created the character based on Mr. Beast, so his color, the sort of panther with the pink lightning, etc. But we had created that campaign, was supposed to go live around Christmas, and so we had themed everything around Christmas. So he had, like, the character itself had a Christmas hat and everything. And I remember Reed, so Mr. Beast's manager, calling me 21st of December. Almost all the team was on holiday already, telling me that the video was not going to go live because he did not like the content that was recorded. And so we ended up having to postpone everything, and the video ended up going live in March of the following year. And so obviously in March, you don't release a character that has a Christmas hat, right? So something I wish I had known earlier was to better anticipate these kind of things, and not tie any in-game integration to a specific season, because if it gets moved around, then you double the work of your product team and your R team into updating everything. So it was a lesson that was learned the really hard way, but I never made that mistake again. And I hope nobody does either, because it was very costful.
Yeah, I guess influencers aren't known for being the most reliable when it comes to specific dates or specific postings. So.
Exactly. And I think that's really important to mention it, because to me and probably to you, because you've run like campaigns at Media Buddies, like you know that influencer dropouts are very common, right? But it often happens to me that I have clients once the campaign is about to go live and we have maybe 5 dropouts, and they're like, what, but how come, like we've paid them, they've sometimes they even drafted the content, like recorded the content, and they drop out, and like it's like a bomb that's been that has landed to the client. And it's just like, like it happens. It happens all the time. It happens probably in every single campaign. Um, the best advice that I can give, and it kind of leads back to the previous question that you had, Maria, is just anticipate. Anticipate you're going to have dropouts. Allocate 10% more of your budget to more creators, so then you ensure that then you're going to end up with your target views, because that's what matters, right? You ensuring that you have enough views to measure your campaign performance.
Yeah, that makes sense, because it's super common, the stories I've heard from why influencers cut posts. They've already submitted a draft, but their dog is sick, so they can't post a video this week.
Or like they're moving, and I'm like, you didn't know you were moving until yesterday? Like, how come? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. So be prepared, I guess, is
be prepared.
The lesson there, and plan for things to go wrong, because sometimes, not always, but sometimes things will go wrong last minute.
Exactly.
So we've covered quite a lot today about minimum budgets and performance, and even doing a Mr. Beast collaboration if that's in the remit for anyone here today. But I guess, what are our sort of top line most important things to remember when starting our influencer marketing campaigns?
So I think to me, it's first invest enough money so you can measure your performance. Otherwise, you're just throwing money out of the window. Again, I've had many experiences where clients come to me and they're like, okay, I've got a spare 40K for influencer marketing to test it. Or like they've done that in the past and they come to me afterwards and they're like, yeah, but it didn't work. And I'm like, well, was it enough? No. So that's why it didn't work. So ensure that you spend enough money. Surround yourself with the right partners, whether you're doing like the campaign internally, or if you want to work with an agency. The good point with working with an agency or like a consultant or anyone like that is because they will have the experience that you might not have in terms of prices, in terms of best practices for your brief, in terms of how do we review drafts, what can we expect from the creators and stuff like that. And if you do work with agencies, make sure that you work with agencies that only take a commission on top of the influencer fee. So they will be incentivized into finding the best possible creators for you at the best possible price. Because I've seen it often in the past where you work with an agency, they ask you for like an upfront fee for like the campaign management fee. And then they send you a list of creators and then you select only 20% of them. That only ends up like allocating 20% of your budget, and you ask for more and they're like, well, no, we've done our job, like here's the list, you have to choose from those. And so in the end you kind of shoot yourself in the foot. So I know Media Buddies is a great agency in that sense, because they take a fair commission and they will get you the best possible influencers at the best possible price until your budget is allocated. So definitely that.
Yeah, for sure. Perfect. Well, I'm going to open the floor for a couple of questions from anyone in the chat. I think I've already seen one come through before I even managed to get that out. So I'll read that one out first from Anna. When I'm scaling, is it better to just increase my spend on a single campaign, or increase the number of campaigns I'm running in a given period?
I think it kind of depends on where you stand with measurement and understanding what's your organic K factor. So how many organic installs do you get for each tracked install? So companies are doing it differently. I know some will run a few campaigns to begin with, analyze the organic through an organic uplift analysis. And if they see that the multiplier from track to organic is more or less the same for each campaign, then they will decide that they don't need to run all the campaigns, like all the creators at the same time. in order to measure the organic spike, and they can have like influencers going live throughout the month, and it doesn't really matter. So they're more free into how they increase the budget. But then if you want to be as accurate as possible all the time, and that you have maybe an internal team that is a bit skeptical, you might want to be relying on those organic uplift analysis. And so it means increasing your budget for a single campaign, but making sure that so all the influencers are going live within a 2-3 day window. So you actually see the installs coming during the same period of time. But also making sure that during your campaign and ideally before your campaign, you don't have too many other factors impacting your organic, right? So try not to run other organic channels like podcasts, like TV, don't have any change of icon or featuring or stuff like that, because otherwise it's going to make some noise in your data and it's going to be harder for you to understand what's the traffic that comes from your campaign.
Sure. And we've got another question here as well, actually. Is there a given amount of budget I should always dedicate to testing new verticals, even if I've already found good verticals that perform well?
Yeah, 100%. 100%, because at some point you will run out of creators that you want to work with. Even if you find top performers and you repeat them, I would also advise like repeating them like within like a 3-month pause period, so you don't burn the audience. But it's really important to keep testing because you will find other types of creators that you never would think would work. I know this game, for example, so it's a hidden object game targeting female 35 plus in the US, and for whatever reason, this channel that is mowing lawns and doing this kind of thing is performing really well, and I would have never ever imagined that, right? So it's really important to keep testing. So I don't know if there's a set portion of the budget, but like let's say 20-25% of your budget, depending on also on where your campaigns are at the moment. Like if you see reaching profitability consistently, then you can afford to have a little bit of a margin to test.
Sure. Yeah, I guess it's satisfying content. Maybe that's why mowing the lawn is so profitable. I'm not sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
I guess I actually had one more question about. So we've been speaking a lot about YouTube, because it's really great for performance in general. If we've started on YouTube and we're testing YouTube, but actually we know that we've got a big audience also on TikTok or also on Instagram, at what point is it best to involve that other platform within our campaigns?
I would tend to say focus on a single platform until you reach profitability, when you're confident that the verticals that you've tested are driving the right results for you. Once you're there, you know what works, then it's just a machine that you keep rolling like month over month. And so that's when you can then shift your focus on a different one and test and follow the testing framework step by step again. But again, it depends on how much resources you have internally. If you have a team internally and you have 3 people that can start handling campaigns, and you're not afraid of investing money to get the learnings, but not reaching profitability to begin with, then you can have one person dedicated to one platform. It really depends on the setup that companies have.
Sure, that makes sense. So, well, thank you, Marion, for helping with all of those questions. We covered loads of stuff, and thank you to everyone who joined today, because we had some great questions as well. You can find both me and Marion on LinkedIn. So if anyone does have any further questions, you're very welcome to message either one of us, and we'll be able to help you with that. You can also book a call with either one of us as well, for more advice specifically on your specific game and your specific minimum budget calculations, and that sort of thing. And this webinar recording will also be made available via the email that you signed up with, and that CPM cheat sheet will be coming through that email as well. So you'll get a better idea of for different geos and for different audiences and different types of content verticals, what sort of CPM you should be expecting to see in those different verticals. So keep an eye out for that on your emails as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much for having me, Fiona. And yeah, people keep a lookout for that cheat sheet because I think it's going to be very helpful.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone again.